Okay.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Agenda has been passed.
Oh, all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Roll call or just every vote technically just roll call?
Okay, so as we recall from our last meeting, FOIA rules for an electronic meeting require that the board members will do all of their votes in roll call fashion. So I'm guessing, Julie, if you want to just go down the list.
Sure, thank you. When you say that.
I use that usually.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
All
no
right.
problem.
So, David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Monica?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Megan? Yes. Cora?
Yes.
I vote yes.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
Growing pains. Growing pains.
So by way of information, I do have a couple of updates that I wanted to share. As this committee may or may not be aware, we have some newer members. The SHRC provides an annual report to the state board, and that is coming due at the end of September. And because of the way that the state board meeting date falls and our next meeting date falls, we will not have an opportunity to review that in person together. However, based on the work plan and other data that goes into that report, I will take a stab at drafting that and then send that around to committee members for you to look at and review and provide your feedback. And after speaking with our chairperson, she's going to try to arrange to be present at that meeting to present in consultation with me to the state board, and their meeting is September 29th. So I wanted to let the committee know about that. Also, we've been talking a lot about updates to our website, and I'm happy to report that there's been some movement with that. So shortly you should see some changes. You'll see that we have created a page specific for individuals that are receiving services with information and links to our resources and trainings on YouTube for them. We've also kind of refreshed the way that our contact map looks. I think you'll like it. And the contact information for our team, now that it's divided out into facility operations and community operations, you'll also see the information should be laid out in a way that is a little bit more easily accessible for providers. So we'll have memos and guidance documents spelled out. So look for that change to come soon. It's been a long time coming and more changes will follow, but I'm excited to report that. Also, I wanted to let you know that the Office of Human Rights had the opportunity to participate in the ARC annual convention, which I think is a real honor. We were part of a panel talking specifically about rights and safety, and there were some great questions. All of the participants were family members or people with lived experience, and I think they had upwards of 300 people participating in that call. So it was an amazing opportunity to hear directly from people about what their concerns are and also share the role and the mission of our office, because we know human rights, when you say that, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. And so being able to kind of give them some real tangible examples and resources about who we are and what we do was a great opportunity. Also, our office is participating with DMAS in doing what we're calling high scrutiny visits for HCBS compliance, and that stands for Home and Community-Based Services. I'm sure, again, everyone's aware of the push to have standardized rules and settings in the community with regard to people who live with ID and DD. And so there is a group of providers that have been identified based on their services, based on their location, to need some additional support to get into compliance. And so the Office of Human Rights has assumed additional responsibility in helping to do some of those visits. We thought it was really important that we're there and visible. And so that's an undertaking that I just want to publicly appreciate our staff for stepping up and doing. We've also, just by looking at data, I know it's important to this committee when we talk about allegations and the numbers of allegations of abuse and neglect that we monitor and review on an annual basis. The larger group of those tend to be neglect. Unlike the way we categorize abuse, where there are subcategories like physical abuse, verbal abuse, neglect is just a big blob of a category. And so when we're thinking about doing something with that data, mitigating neglect, it would be helpful to know what we mean when we say neglect. Is it I failed to sign a MAR, and so it's difficult to tell if I gave the med, versus I gave a medication to somebody that I shouldn't have given a medication to, or a person fell in the bathroom and no staff participated in supporting them for hours upon, right? Like, so what's the difference? What are we talking about when we say neglect? And so again, my amazing team of managers has stepped up to help do kind of this pilot study where we took 2 quarters worth of data where a provider entered in and categorized something as neglect, rightly or wrongly, we learned, and we recategorized it into 3 subcategories of neglect, trying to see if those subcategories fit, right? And so the subcategories we came up with were medication errors, because that tends to be a lot of them. And even medication errors are something to be dealt with in and of themselves. The other had to do with elopement and AWOLs. And then the other kind of catch-all category was just a failure to provide a service of support. And so we don't have the results of that yet, but I would be happy to come back to this committee and share more about it. Again, the reason we were doing that is to be able to, in the long run, have some of that data integrity happen on the front end. So when a provider is reporting neglect, they're able to tell us a little bit more about what type of neglect, so that at the end of the day, when we're determining how many of those have been substantiated or unsubstantiated, it helps guide the type of technical assistance and training we're providing to providers. So that's a big project I wanted to share. Also, our periodic review is still in process, and I am such a nerd when it comes to reading our regulations. I love it, and we have a subgroup, and I'm looking at Anne, and she's probably feeling the same way. We've been meeting for a while, and we've been going through each section of the regs, thinking about how can we make this more explicit? How can we make sure the rights are clear? How can we make sure provider duties are clear and appropriate and necessary? And the things that we're looking for as regulators are spelled out. So when we say we want to verify corrective action, what does that mean for a provider? And let's put that in language. So we've gone through and made kind of our initial decisions about what we'd like to see. And our regulatory coordinator with the department is working on a draft. Certainly the next step is to speak with the Office of Attorney General to get some feedback and kind of make sure we're staying in our lane. And then we will continue to follow the process where it goes out for public comment, where we have a regulatory action group. I think that's what it's called. Essentially where you get stakeholders involved and we have conversations about the draft. So that's also fun, but just giving you an update about where we are. And certainly we'll want some feedback and participation from this group. The other thing, the big thing is we're growing as an office, which is awesome. I'm super excited. We actually have several of our new staff members participating in the meeting today. So Tony Davis, I think you all heard me talk about him. He may not have heard me talk about him at our last meeting, but you have him here present, and he will actually be giving the VCBR facility report. So he assumed, if you remember Carrie Flowers, he assumed her position, which is a big position, and providing facility advocacy services to Central State Hospital, as well as Hiram Davis, as well as VCBR and PGH. So we're super excited to have him aboard. We also have, let's give it up. He's in the room. We also have on the call Chelsea Robinette, who has joined us as a community advocate in Region 3, which is a diverse geographic location, but lots of work to be done protecting rights, technically advising and training providers in the community. And so we're super thankful to have her. She has experience working with the CSB. And so that's always great when we can make that connection. So we're thankful to have her join our team. And if we clap for Tony, we got to clap for her. Absolutely. In addition, we have vacancies that we are really close to filling in Region 4 for a community advocate and Region 5 for a community advocate. We also have a vacancy in our facility team for the advocate that serves at Eastern State Hospital and Southeast Virginia Training Center. We recently hired a part-time advocate at Northern Virginia Mental Health Institute, Ivana Onajafe, and super thankful to have that person be able to focus on that facility. It's a unique facility, smaller in comparison, but certainly lots of good, meaningful work and advocacy that needs to happen there. And that's a relatively new position. We had a community advocate kind of splitting their time, and we're learning that, we just kind of got to focus where we got to focus. And so I'm thankful that we had the opportunity to do that. We also have a significant change in our facility team where one of our longtime advocates has decided to retire. Maynard Ritchie, I believe this committee has heard from him before. He was providing advocacy at Western State Hospital and the Commonwealth Center for Children and Adolescents. And he has officially retired. I think the day is like September, but he had enough leave to leave us, and he chose to do that. And so we are both grateful for his service, but feeling some of that tension because you heard me say we have a vacancy at Eastern State and Southeast Virginia Training Center, and now we have a vacancy at Western State and CCCA. So my facility leadership team, Brandon and Mary Claire, are doing an amazing job, a heavy lift, and we're looking forward to having a full team there shortly. I think the only other thing by way of information I wanted to share was just to reiterate some of the comments Karen made before about the FOIA requirements. I think they're important to kind of say out loud again. So we're in this time and space where the state of emergency has expired, where we kind of had that grace to do virtual meetings, kind of all virtual. Well, we can no longer do that. As a public body, we need to have a physical quorum in person, which we do have today, because right now we have 7 appointed members. As you remember, John and Sandy, those are vacancies, so those positions aren't appointed. So with the 4 members that are here, we do have a physical quorum. Once those positions are appointed, our quorum increases because then we will have 9 members, right? So we're good, we can check the box there. Also, the other requirements with regard to having electronic meetings is what we just experienced is all of our votes have to be done in roll call fashion and recorded that way in the minutes. And I think that's just a really important transparency element. We've also taken care to make sure that when we post information about the meeting, people have the ability to access virtually, like some of our members are today, and that they have a phone number to call, which is mine, in the event there's some type of disconnect between what's happening virtually. The other thing that I think is important to note is that we will have to have at least one meeting annually, and this year we haven't yet, where all of our members participate physically. So we don't have members participating virtually. And I don't know how to explain that other than that's just part of the FOIA rules. And so this committee can talk about which meeting we want that to be, whether that's our September meeting, our November meeting, or our December meeting. Generally, I will say in December, the committee usually meets here in Richmond, and that might be a good opportunity to make that our all members who can come to the meeting here. If you can't, and we have a quorum, then obviously you won't be able to participate electronically. I think that was all I wanted to say. Well, there is one other thing that we'll probably talk about when we get to the bylaws report and the policy report is that we do have to finalize a policy that clarifies how members will participate electronically, right? So whether it's under the exemption or exception, I don't know what you call it, when someone has a medical condition that prevents them from coming or another personal matter. And Karen did such a good job of spelling out the language for me, so I will make sure I give that to everybody so you're aware of it, and we will get that into a policy, I'm hoping, before our next meeting. Karen, did you want to add to anything about that?
Just
Can I
say that there's really 2 ways that state public bodies can have meetings electronically. One is the first one that Tanika sort of talked about where, you know, nobody is, quote, out sick today, but we've got a quorum here and we're meeting certain requirements, some of which are even behind the scenes for you all that Tanika and Cleveland take care of, submitting information to the FOIA Council, et cetera, about the electronic meeting. The other way is when an individual member has a case of illness, either theirs or a family member or a personal circumstance that prevents them from coming. And what FOIA requires is that you develop a policy, a written policy for that second way. So when she's talking about we're going to get that in place, then that would enable that second way to meet electronically if that ever became a situation for somebody. So that's what that is. And then the other thing that we are going to be working on in addition to that written policy is just some written guidance for the committee to put out about public comment and how they want to handle public comments going forward as far as times and things like that. So those are sort of 2 things that are in the pipeline from a FOIA perspective.
And that's all the information I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a lot. It looks like really good things are happening, so.
Hey, I've got a quick question. So this is Tim, and the quick question is, I don't really know the bylaws very well, so this is for bylaws and committee, but, so we can operate with 7 people? We don't have to operate with 9?
So we are operating with 7. 9 is the max that we can have appointed. And so, yes, we should still be working in the subcommittee to get members, to interview them and present them to the state board to be appointed. So 9 is what we should have, but yes, we can operate with 7.
Okay.
Here, we're just a little bit behind with our regular session, so we'll just go ahead and move into it. If that's all right, I'll call the regular session to order. And ask that we review the draft minutes, if there are any comments or changes before we take a vote on accepting the draft minutes. Any changes or anything? Can I have a motion to accept the draft minutes?
I make a motion to accept the draft minutes that have been presented.
We'll take a vote. David, how do you vote?
Yes.
Monica?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Megan? Cora?
Yes.
Thank you, and I vote yes. Take the opportunity now to go into the next. We'll take our next agenda item is a regulation spotlight from SHRC Henderson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm SHRC Henderson. Good morning. I'm SHRC Henderson. I have the honor of serving as the Region 4 Regional Advocate. And I have the privilege of bringing to you all the regulation spotlight. So we'll get started. I'll share my screen with you. Okay, are you all able to see the PowerPoint? If you could just shake your head.
Yes. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Give me 1 second. Okay, so today's purpose, there are 2 items to provide an overview of section 12-35-115, 105 of the Human Rights Regulations, which focuses on behavioral treatment plans, and also to ensure a contextual understanding so that the State Human Rights Committee may use this information presented to ensure due process. A behavioral treatment plan, often referred to as the BTP, is a positive tool and resource to assist the individuals in reaching their therapeutic goals. The BTP must be carefully developed based on a systemic data collection by a licensed professional or a licensed behavioral analyst. After the period of data collection, the BTP must include documented procedures for how the plan is carried out. The documented procedures are an integral part of the ISP or BTP, in other words. The procedures are essential to the individual service plan. The human rights regulations allows for providers to use individualized restrictions such as restraint or timeout in a behavioral treatment plan. These restrictive interventions should only be used in a BTP addressing challenging behaviors that present immediate danger to the individual or others. Most importantly, as we just discussed, the BTP can only be implemented after a licensed professional or a licensed behavioral analyst has conducted a detailed and systematic assessment of the behavior and the situations in which it occurs. You may refer to Section 30 of the regulations for the definition of a licensed professional. A licensed behavioral analyst is a person licensed by the Board of Medicine to practice behavioral analysis. Either a board certified behavioral analyst or a board certified assistant behavior analyst can become a licensed behavior analyst. Although they are not required to write the plan, the licensed professional or licensed behavioral analyst is required to conduct the assessment. A qualified professional has the ability to develop and implement a restrictive plan, assuming that a licensed professional or licensed behavioral analyst has conducted the assessment. An independent review committee is appointed or accessed by a provider to review and approve the clinical efficacy of the provider's behavioral treatment plans and associated data collection procedures. An independent review committee shall be composed of professionals with training and experience in behavioral analysis and interventions who are not involved in the development of the plan or directly providing services to the individual. It's important to note that the Office of Human Rights does not have oversight, authority, or responsibility for the independent review committee. If you would like additional information on the definition of the independent review committee, you can also find that in Section 30 of the Human Rights Regulations. While it may be best practice, only BTPs that contain restraint or timeout are require the higher standard of a detailed and systemic assessment by a licensed professional. All restraints identified in the BTP must align with the provider's behavior management program or protocol, such as therapeutic options, MANT, or crisis prevention intervention. Those are just a few. There's plenty more, but that's just an example. If a physical intervention is needed to maintain an individual's safety prior to the independent review committee and or the local human rights committee review, providers may use their emergency response policies and procedures. Providers that are intermediate care facilities or individuals with intellectual disability facilities must submit behavioral treatment plans involving restraint or timeout, along with its independent review committee approval to the specially constituted committee. All other providers must submit behavioral treatment plans involving restraint or timeout, along with their independent review committee approval to the local human rights committee prior to implementation. Our office has streamlined LHRC review process by incorporating the LHRC review forms. Providers requesting to present a behavioral treatment plan with restraint or timeout may do so by completing the review form and submit any supporting documentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. This is Tim. So my question kind of is, where do you see the SHRC's purview as related to behavior treatment plans? Is this something we just review? Do we have a say in it? Is this more of a doctor's thing? Kind of what what side of the street are we on with this?
That's a great question. So from my understanding, the local human rights committee would review this, and Tanika, you can chime in if I'm wrong, but I would think if there was a disagreement with that, is that where the SHRC would come into play?
You're doing great, Sheree. That's exactly
Okay.
where my head was at. Certainly, the way you described it is exactly right. The local human rights committee has the primary responsibility of due process with the individual to review the behavior treatment plans. I think that the SHRC may come across a behavior treatment plan if it's part of a complaint, if it's part of an allegation of abuse. Certainly you oversee the LHRC, and so a review that happens there may at some point come to you, but the avenue for that is probably most likely going to be through an appeal of an allegation of abuse or complaint.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheree. That was very helpful. And Tim, that's a great question. You know, that I think probably the local human rights committees, certainly in Northern Virginia, spend a lot of time reviewing and ensuring that the process is in place. Are there any other questions for the committee? This is really one of the first times we've had a chance to talk about behavior treatment plans or seclusion and restraint as it affects the community. In full disclosure,
No.
I am a licensed behavior analyst, so this happens to be my wheelhouse, right? So go ahead, David, sorry. You have a question?
No, I had no questions. I was just saying no questions. It's a good presentation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Looks like Brandon has his hand raised. Did you want to add something to the conversation?
I'm sorry, I was doing the little clap emoji for Sheree because she did a great job, but thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I add to that clap emoji by clapping for real. Thank you so much, Sheree. We appreciate that.
Thank you all.
so
On behalf of Region 4 in our office, we just want to thank the committee for your service. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too. Thank you so much. I'd like to take the opportunity to open our public comment period. Is there anyone online or nearby that would like to make a public comment? Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the comment period. We've noticed that there are some additional folks on at least on the Zoom, so we'll do introductions again. I'd like to welcome everyone to the State Human Rights Committee meeting today. My name is Julie Allen. I'm the chair, and I'll ask everyone in the room today to introduce themselves and their role, and then we'll move to everyone that is online virtually. Okay.
Good morning, Tanika Goldman, State Human Rights Director.
Timothy Russell, State Human Rights Committee member, Williamsburg, Virginia, Region 5.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Sharkey. I'm the State Human Rights Committee.
Good morning, Tony Davis, Human Rights Advocate.
Good morning, Mary Claire O'Hara, Human Rights Associate Director for Facility Operations.
Hello, I'm Clea Kinsey, Secretary in the Office of Human Rights.
Good morning, Monica Lucas, Region 4 Committee Member.
Hi, Karen Taylor with the Office of the Attorney General, Counsel to the committee.
Thank you. That's everyone in the room, and I'll ask Brandon to introduce himself.
Hi, good morning. Brandon Rotenberry, Office of Human Rights. I am the Facility Advocate Manager.
David?
Good morning. David Boehm. I am a Human Rights Committee member, and I'm from far Southwest Virginia in Marion.
Cora?
Good morning, I'm Cora Swett. I'm State Human Rights Committee member representing the Northern Virginia, Prince William County specific.
Chelsea?
I'm Chelsea, the community advocate for Region 3.
Ann?
Good morning, Ann Pasco. I'm the regional manager in Region 2.
And Dean?
Hi, we're Christine from St. Mary's in Norfolk, Virginia.
Thank you, welcome. And Dustin?
Good morning, Dustin Wilcox with DBHGS Alternative Transportation.
Thank you. And Reggie?
Reginald Day, Regional Manager, Region 5.
Thank you. Did everyone have a chance to introduce themselves? If not, please go ahead and unmute. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your introductions. We'll move on to our guest presenter, Dustin. We're excited to hear more about the Alternative Transportation Program and how things are going there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Everybody can hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up just to make sure my computer audio is good deal? I am going to try to keep it brief. Like my supervisor says, I could go on for hours about this program, but hopefully it tells you how much I love it. A little bit about me before I get started. I came into this role as the Alternative Transportation Program Liaison about 2 years ago. Since then, I've been basically building the quality assurance piece for this program. With it being a statewide program, vehicles going everywhere, I'm sure you can understand the magnitude of what that looks like. Prior to that, I was with law enforcement for about 8 years in a local jurisdiction in Southwest Virginia. But enough about me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen with everybody, and hopefully it works. Everybody see it okay? Good deal. Good deal.
Yes.
So like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about alternative transportation today. I've actually spoken with the Human Rights Council before, so if you've heard from me before and I repeat some things, I do apologize. But again, lots of stuff going on with it for the future, and you need to know where it came from to know where it's going. So without further ado, today I'm going to talk to you about alternative transportation, where it came from with the initial pilot in Mount Rogers CSB back in 2016. I'm going to talk a little bit about where it is now, what the data looks like, who exactly is being transported, where they are going, what the quality assurance piece looks like, and then what future aspirations are coming up for alternative transportation. If you pay attention to the news at all, I'm sure you've heard it come up quite a bit with different pieces. So with the pilot program back in 2016, over the course of a 14-month period, Mount Rogers CSB was able to push out 1,159 TDOs. One thing that you must know about this particular program is we only do transport for civil TDOs and not criminal TDOs. As you can imagine, there are a few things to the criminal TDO transport piece, such as restraints that kind of do not allow for alternative transportation to take that on. So back then, DBHGS, Mount Rogers CSB, got into a contract with Steadfast LLC, the alternative transportation provider then. I will say the difference here for our current transport piece is that we use G4S alternative transportation. So back then, during the pilot period, out of 1,159 TDOs, 472 were transported by Steadfast, 687 were transported by law enforcement. So Steadfast transported 41%. What I want you to note is that was the overall number, 41% overall. By the end of the last 2 months, I believe, of that 14-month period, Steadfast was actually transporting over 50%, which is where G4S gets the 50% of transports in the contract they currently have. That is what we look to do. We are currently doing about 10 to 12% a month And I will definitely talk more about data here in just a little bit. It still remains to be seen if we will reach that 50% mark, but please stay tuned. So just like with the pilot program, currently in the alternative transportation program, there are disqualifiers. Reasons law enforcement transported during the pilot, self-harm. So obviously individuals come into the TDO process, into the ECO process, they may be trying to harm themselves, maybe trying to end their lives. If they are actively trying to do it then, they're actively trying to do it now, they are not qualified for the program. So there is a difference between passive suicidality and active suicidality. If they're passive, you know, they may want to take the long sleep. They may have a notion that they do want to end their lives or cause harm to themselves, but they don't have access to means and they don't have a plan. They can still qualify for alternative transportation, but it's that active trying to get a hold of means or get a hold of something else to end their lives. Risk to others. Individuals that are actively fighting law enforcement coming into the hospital or are actively fighting hospital staff while they're waiting for transport or something to that effect. Those folks are disqualified out of the service because the restraint process to this is that there are no restraints other than the vehicle itself. So these individuals will get into the transport vehicle, not in handcuffs, not in shackles, not in zip ties or anything like that. They're free to move about the passenger compartment as best as they can. Obviously, we try to keep them seat belted, but if they choose not to be seat belted and they're above 18, that is their choice. And then, are they an elopement risk? Obviously, these folks, for our particular transport piece now on alternative transportation, if they are an elopement risk, they are most likely a no-go for the service. Again, they are not in any types of restraints. And this particular program does allow for bathroom breaks. So just like back with the pilot program and now with alternative transportation, if they're an elopement risk, they cannot be taken on. And then finally, for the pilot, short distance. So roughly 25% of the transports that law enforcement took on for Mount Rogers back in that pilot period, the reason that law enforcement took them on is because it was short distance. So if they're in the ED on the first floor of the hospital and they need to be going up to the fourth floor, the behavioral health unit, obviously alternative transportation stepping in would not make that much sense. Law enforcement still has to execute the TDO, still has to hand over the AT order. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a vehicle come from, you know, even 20 to 30 minutes away if law enforcement is just going to have to play such a huge piece in it. So obviously short distance, that ended up law enforcement taking quite a few people. And that plays out now as well, a little differently since quite a few of the transports are with this particular service taking on 200 plus miles across the state, as you can imagine. So definitely something that plays out now, but just slightly different. With the pilot program then, there were approximately 4 vehicles used, minivans and old police sedans. I will tell you with this program, and you'll see pictures throughout, we are using Dodge Durangos. Those Dodge Durangos are upfitted like a police cruiser on the inside, but if you're on the outside and you don't know what you're looking for, you wouldn't really know the difference from it being the mom's soccer vehicle, if you will, and transporting across the state of Virginia. So again, we want to play the idea of not stigmatizing the individual being transported in a vehicle that's marked up on the side with police logos and things like that. So again, it's concealed. We don't want folks to be able to see that from the outside. And then in the pilot program, it was documented every individual was transported safely and securely. So let's transition from pilot to now. Some of you may be familiar with the type of funding that was pushed out for this particular service. The first year back in 2019, once the contract was signed, $2.5 million was spent taking care of the contract. Some other funding was used for infrastructure. Obviously, we had to build up a fleet of vehicles. The vehicles had to be upfitted. There had to be tablets, phones, things like that, and a bunch of gear for the individuals that were doing the transports. So the first year was $2.5 million, and then the second year and ongoing is $4.5 million a year to be able to do this particular service. I want to draw your attention to that number, as when the pilot was going forward with Mount Rogers, the idea was that it would cost $10 million to do the service every year across the state of Virginia. Obviously, we are using half of that currently. We did have a little bit extra left in our budget this last fiscal year, but the pandemic definitely brought down our numbers, as you can imagine. But we will be going forward to the General Assembly in our next regular session, asking for a little bit more funding to be able to shore up 2 drivers at each hub across the state of Virginia, and then also having a couple of what we are quote unquote calling floater vehicles that can pick up the slack where there are more than a couple of transport requests coming through for a specific area of CSBs. So again, we'll be asking for more funding, but going on, we have $4.5 million a year. G4S Secure Solutions won the contract. That is the company for this program. Again, the pilot was Steadfast LLC. This one is G4S Secure Solutions. Some of you may or may not know G4S was actually bought out over the last 8 months. I think they've been dealing with that, and they will actually switch names in October. I believe it's October the 6th. They will be known as Allied Universal. So when they do that, the only thing that's going to change is the name. They'll still keep the same uniforms, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. They'll still keep the same administration, the same drivers and all that good stuff. It'll just be a name change. But for this particular organization, there are over 500,000 employees. They're an international organization, and they have a healthcare division with very similar sister programs, but on a smaller level. And those programs are in North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. Those programs are private contracts, some with local law enforcement, others with private hospital systems that transport back and forth within their own particular systems. So as you can imagine, within the state of Virginia, there are 40 CSBs. We transport to roughly 60 some hospitals, and we transport from just as many hospitals. So as you can imagine, there are quite a few personalities we are dealing with at any given time, and working through that has been challenging, but we've been able to do it with our community partners. So again, we do have sister programs that we do steal quite a few of the ideas and the protocols and the procedures from. Virginia split into 5 DBHGS regions, as you know, 40 community services boards. This particular rollout began back in October of 2019 in far Southwest Virginia, Region 3. We have since rolled out to all regions as of February of this year. And the final piece to all of it was a rollout in March of this year of the children and adolescents piece. I will say that we had a pilot from November of 2020 all the way through when it started up statewide in March of 2021 for the children and adolescents piece, ages 12 to 17. I'll speak a little bit more about that, but things went really well with that, and approximately 60 some juveniles were transported out of the Region 3 area. And it was definitely a good start for us to be able to get that going during the pandemic and everything else that was going on. You see the number right here is 23 vehicles for the entire state. I will say, to my understanding, we're at 22 right now. One of the things Virginia has going for it's a pretty good deer population. So we're down to 22. Current AT program, again, there are 8 hubs in Virginia. Those are the main spots the drive We have used gas station parking lots with agreements with the owners. We've used CSBs, we've hospitals, law enforcement installations, places like that to be able to park the vehicles and the drivers, just so that they are strategically located closer to where a lot of the pickups are coming from. We are also ensuring that they are meeting the need of the folks that only use the service once or twice a month, or once or twice every couple of months. So it's interesting trying to make sure that all of the demand is met, from the boards that are asking 3 or 4 times a day to the boards that are asking once or twice every month. Meeting that is definitely challenging, but we're doing a pretty good job, I like to think. And then the big piece for this, unlike with law enforcement, sometimes law enforcement does have this going for them, but for alternative transportation, we have predetermined restroom stop breaks. So if there is going to be a longer transport, which may be 4 hours one way, they have an agreement with certain law enforcement agencies, with certain hospitals with security on hand, to use that facility for a bathroom stop break, a place for the individuals to stretch their legs and things of that nature. So we are able to do that and keep the individuals safe and secure, help them get back into the vehicle and all that good stuff. These drivers, the HSP, wear a soft uniform. It's a bright blue polo shirt with khaki pants. They do not have weapons of any kind on them, and they do not have access to restraints. Again, these individuals getting into this particular vehicle, the vehicle itself is a restraint device, if you will, because there are petitions. The back door has a child lock on it. These individuals cannot get out and have been unable to get out on their own free will. They have to be open from the outside. So the vehicle does play a role as a restraint device, but they are not put in handcuffs. They're not put in shackles. They're not put in zip ties or anything like that. The staff are vetted using background checks through Virginia State Police. And a lot of the folks being brought on board have hospital experience, have law enforcement experience, military experience, security, mental health field experience, and the like. The organization G4S does a really good job at vetting the individuals that they bring on to provide this particular service. The training curriculum occurs over the course of 3 to 4 weeks. Myself, as well as my supervisor, Gil Pacor, we do a lot of the training for the staff. So we're involved. We're able to see, where we can shore up the training for them, what they want more of. And I will say a lot of them ask for this magic pill, if you will, of how to help a patient get through a crisis. Because again, these folks are still in the crisis as they're being transported. So they get training in mental health first aid, CPR first aid, CPI, for those of you familiar with that, for de-escalation. And then we actually have put together at DBHDS a training centered around CIT, so crisis intervention team. But we took out quite a few pieces of it. Obviously, they don't need to know about use of force, certain psychotropic medications, things like that. That doesn't need to be in their forte. But we did want to keep with a lot of the information that's in there. And then ongoing, we do give them other trainings. We're working with the REACH folks from each region, and they will be doing a training ongoing for our drivers in special populations, IDDD, and things like that. So we do try to keep up with their training, keep them going with new lessons. And then finally, for the service, there are capabilities to request 2 healthcare support staff, as well as requesting same-sex driver as the individual if clinically indicated it's necessary. Obviously, there are restraints to that. Is that staff on duty? Is that staff going to need to be pulled from 4 hours away? Can you wait that long? They are able to do it, but sometimes it makes more sense to utilize law enforcement if that comes up. So let's talk about data real quick. Before I do this, I want to say that I have made access to both this presentation as well as a data presentation that I'm not going to be going specifics into, but any questions you have data-wise, it's in that presentation as well, and the office should have it for y'all to be able to see. So where is AT now? October 7th, 2019 through July 31st. On the average, it takes G4S about 48 minutes to arrive at the pickup site. G4S, if you didn't know, is contractually obligated to arrive within 2 hours to a pickup site 90% of the time. They have never fallen below 95% of the time. So they've been able to keep contractually pretty good with that particular piece. To date, 38 out of the 40 community services boards across the Commonwealth have utilized AT services. Again, like I stated before, there are disparities amongst the CSBs. There are certain CSBs we get 3 or 4 transports a day requests for. There are other CSBs that, again, have not utilized us or only utilize us once or twice a month. It just changes with how everything else in the state of Virginia changes. G4S has transported since the beginning in October of 2019 over 3,000 individuals in crisis. Of those 3,026, 209 were juveniles. AT has covered over 734,000 miles. I will say roughly every month they're doing between 50 and 60,000 miles now. So they will probably hit that 1,000,000-mile mark not too far from here. AT has saved law enforcement approximately 7,486 hours since July of 2020. It's only tracking since July of 2020 because that's when we started tracking that particular number. Law enforcement asked us to start tracking that, and they definitely appreciate it. So who are we transporting? There's not a huge disparity between male and female. It seems like we're sticking pretty close to the border there. Age of individuals transported. Obviously, there are quite a few folks we've transported anywhere from age 7 all the way up into the 90s. But a majority of the folks being transported are between 21 and 49, with the most being in their 30s. And then the most common primary diagnosis for individuals, a lot of folks with depressive disorders. That is what we are seeing across the board. That may be in reference to that just with the pandemic and just everything else going on. Second to that's probably bipolar, and then third to that is probably schizoaffective and schizophrenia. So obviously lots of different types of clinical presentations that G4S is seeing, a lot of substance use disorders, things like that. But G4S has done a really good job working through all of those particular pieces. And again, this is just a small breakdown of it all. If you have other questions, you can definitely look at the other presentation that I've provided. Child and adolescent transport, like I stated before, there was a pilot conducted back in November of 2020 through the middle of March 2021. During that time, there were approximately 66 juveniles transported ages 12 to 17. Now that the program is statewide for juveniles and adolescents, all ages are able to be transported. We have transported someone as young as 7, and I believe that's been a couple of times. So they take on everybody. As you can see with these particular vehicles, this vehicle upfitting is slightly different from the standard vehicle. This is a specialty vehicle for juveniles and adolescents, as well as the bariatric population. It is so that the individual in the back, if they need a child safety seat, that can be secured down. The standard vehicle, the back seat is actually hard plastic, and you cannot secure a child safety seat, but that is for both hygiene purposes as well as an individual not tearing up the back seat itself. Some of the folks that do get in the vehicle do dysregulate. The drivers do a great job at de-escalating the individuals, but if something does come up, law enforcement can be called to assist. These specialty vehicles also have tablets in them for Disney Plus, which is uploaded. The kids, to my understanding, love it. I think the hardest part for the drivers at this point is to actually get the kids to walk away from the movie if it's not all the way through. So definitely a really good piece to that. Some of you may be aware of the fact the program was initially supposed to have a parent or guardian ride along in the vehicle. That has since been pushed away just due to liability purposes. That was vetted through the Attorney General's office after questions from the vendor service. Here's where the individuals are being transported to. This is just a snippet of requests from Region 3 specifically for February of 2021. So this is not across several months or anything like that, or all the state. So this just shows you they go practically anywhere. Just for 1 month, there's about 20, 25 different places they went to, with several facilities quite a few times. We have definitely transported to a handful of facilities a majority of the time, with state facilities not being quite as frequent. Quality assurance, the piece that I like to consider my baby, if you will. We do bi-monthly video and audio recording reviews. So there are video cameras in all the vehicles that are capturing these transports 24/7. The individuals being transported are made aware of the video camera. Obviously, if you were somebody that was going through a crisis and there may be some paranoia, if you will, about that camera sitting or staring at you. So they do get questions, but they make the individual aware that that is there. So there are audio and video recordings 24/7. The patient satisfaction survey pilot that I am doing with Piedmont CSB, we're getting ready to go live with that sometime in the near future. And that is because we really want to know what the patient is feeling about the service. Do they like it? Do they dislike it? what are things that are going well, what are things that are not going well. There's a quarterly newsletter that I send out to keep the communication up with the drivers, with the staff, and the administration for the service. We give them training updates, tips, and recognition when the drivers, the HSP, do a really good job. Quality assurance councils with stakeholders for every region. As soon as we start up a region, we go about a month, and then we bring stakeholders from each area of the service. So law enforcement, magistrates offices, CSBs, hospitals, you name it, we have them in the councils. We are getting ready to dissolve the regional councils and break it into a state council with representatives from each region and then each stakeholders group, as well as the proponents for, VHHA and the Virginia Service Association, the Chiefs of Police Association, and the like, and bring them into that particular group as well. And then weekly meetings with the vendor administration too. So a minute or two left. Continuum of care, future aspirations for the program. Obviously, you've probably all heard we are getting ready to start a pilot program with Western State Hospital for discharge transports. So we're going to be transporting from state facilities to step-down facilities or to their private residence. G4S will take on that particular piece. Whether or not you know it, there are folks that end up staying at psychiatric hospitals, plain and simply because they don't have a ride to get to where they need to go to. A lot of these folks are transported by Uber, Lyft, taxi cabs, and to say it this way, I'm sorry I have to say it, but once they learn the address of the facility, they do not come to pick up the individual. So a lot of these folks don't have ways to get back home, and G4S is going to pick up the slack for that so that beds can become open so more folks can come in and get the services that they need. And then finally, committed patient transports. There's a missing piece to all of this in the sense that folks are in the hospitals, at the ED, at the emergency department longer, waiting for a bed. These folks end up qualifying out of services for alternative transportation because they get a bedside hearing and a special justice and become committed individuals at the emergency department before even getting to the treatment facilities. We want to be able to do those transports, and that is something that we're looking into doing. It will take some contract modifications, but hopefully we'll be able to start that and be able to pick up the slack somewhat. And then there's just a picture of one of our teams. This is the Richmond staff having a little bit of fun, staying masked up. The staff do an amazing job. Again, they're great people, and what we want them to understand is that they are humans transporting humans, and that's what we want to make sure everybody understands. They do a great job, and we love them for all that they do. Obviously, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or my supervisor, Gail Paysor. The contact information is there. Feel free, and I'm open if I know I've gone a couple minutes over, but if anybody has any questions, I am definitely open to sharing and answering.
Dustin, thank you very much for your presentation. I had the opportunity to hear your initial report on the pilot, so it's really interesting to see how much the program has grown, and hopefully we're providing this kind of transportation with dignity. Are there any questions from the committee, Tim?
I'm sorry. I did have a question. I want to say, Dustin, thank you for this extensive report, because it really brings to life what's going on around the state in areas that we may not have direct access to. With the staff, the healthcare support professionals, are they trained in human rights as well? And if there is a disruption during a transport, are those incidences reported into CHRC if they apply to the human rights regulations or the, the complexities of the level 1, 2, and 3 serious incident reporting? Is that training provided to them? And if there is a breakdown, where is that reported?
So a couple of things there. In reference to the particular training on human rights, I will say we've actually had Ms. Goldman come in and teach the presentation before. We have since then, we love being able to do that, but we have since then evolved and still teach human rights, but we have that as a presentation of them, either from Gail and myself or from administrative staff within G4S. So they do get training for human rights. And then I actually double up on the training myself when I present civil commitment processes. Outside of that, if the vehicle, if I'm understanding you correctly, if maybe the patient has a dysregulation and the individual gets escalated in the back and they start harming themselves and law enforcement has to be called in, that is something that's reported directly to my office. We track it, we review video, we see where we can do better and things of that nature. It's not something that is presented to your office. Definitely something I think that we can look into and move on from there. But no, it is not, to my understanding, something that's presented to your office.
Okay, thank you. I can say something about that to give it a little bit more context, because that's a really good question. So the staff are trained on what human rights are, because in the grand scheme, they're going to a licensed or operated facility, or they're coming from a licensed or operated facility. And so certainly there may be times when they relay information about treatment they received in a licensed facility, and those staff need to know what our complaint resolution process is. And if they are making an allegation that involves those entities, it would be reported to our office via the computerized human rights information system. All other aspects of potential abuse that's alleged would be reported to local DSS agencies, just like anybody would report anywhere else. So I understand what Dustin's saying about it would be, they would look into it, but certainly the folks are mandated reporters. So it wouldn't necessarily get to our office unless it alleged abuse against an employee or an agent of a licensed or operated provider. Okay. All right.
Hey, Justin, this is Tim. Thank you for your report. Just a couple things. This program, is Withville in the Mount Rogers catchment area?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This kind of started out in Withville 5 years ago? Because I think the SHRC was out there looking at a group home when this whole thing was introduced. So it's kind of nice to see it come back around and where you guys are with stuff. I'm a little older, memory's fading, so but it's nice to hear. So a couple of questions, and I probably didn't hear the answers. You may have said them, so excuse me for being repetitive, but are the alternative transportation companies licensed through the state?
They are not licensed entities through the state. We do have a business associates agreement with them, which allows us to share information. But outside of that, they are not licensed services.
Okay. And as the alternative transportation are unencumbering law enforcement with these responsibilities, have you heard anything from law enforcement about whether they are satisfied, happy, discouraged with the process, and are they encouraging it? It sounds like it's something that's been working. So, and I was curious, not only from the law enforcement side, and I saw that you have a pilot survey going, but it'd be interesting to hear from the clients that are being transported, because I remember in Withville 5 years ago, the preliminary thing was from some of the clients, their feedback was they really liked not being in the back of a squad car, and they felt that they were less likely to act out if they were treated differently than as a criminal. So I didn't know if that was your experience with the survey.
So Tim, I will tell you that it depends on where you're at in the state. So just to give you an example, Mount Rogers specifically, we're doing roughly 25 to 35 transports a month. They are one of our higher utilizers, if not the highest utilizer. We're trying to bottle that up and put it across the state. We have weekly, monthly meetings with different boards, with different groups to try to keep alternative transportation alive. So we do roughly 1 in every 3 civil TDO transports out of Region 3, 3A, and 3B every month. So we hover around 29 to 32% of their transports every month. However, the rest of the state, it just depends. So sometimes we do, less than a couple of percent. Sometimes we do 15%. Depending upon the region. So we hear exactly what that plays out like around the state. So Region 3 loves us. Region 2 wishes that we were there more frequently. Part of that has to do with hiring processes. We were paying a competitive price. G4S was paying a competitive wage for other places across the state. But just like you can see, you can go to Sheets now, or sorry, Target now make a really competitive wage, have your tuition paid for, and all that good stuff. And you don't have to come in when, you know, G4S is short staffed, and you don't have to do an 8-hour drive, and you don't have to do all of those different things. So hiring can sometimes be a complication in being able to get staff in certain places. So it creates issues with being able to staff up in certain areas, and there's more turn downs just due to staffing. I will say that in those places, we are trying to shift resources. We've currently shifted our Culpeper hub to Warrenton, for those of you that are familiar, and we've shifted our Stanton hub to Charlottesville. And we're trying to capture as many folks as we can, and trying to dumb down that issue of not being able to pick it up just due to staffing or due to distance, just because we want to be able to pick up those numbers and help as many folks as possible. Law enforcement seems to love us, as long as we're able to help them out as much as possible. And there are certain pockets where we're doing really good. Does that make sense? I feel like I went on a tangent.
No, that answers quite a bit. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I've got one question. This is David. Dustin, you mentioned 8 hours. I understand that you all went to 12-hour shifts.
So yes, it depends on what hub they're actually at. They could be a 12-hour hub, they could be a 10-hour hub. It's they've had to get creative just due to staffing, and they've also gotten creative based upon what it looks like where the requests are coming in from. So it depends on where they're at as to what their shifts actually are.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thanks. I'm kind of in an unusual situation where I get information because where I'm located, I also know some of the people who actually work for you. So it's kind of like I get information from different areas. But thank you very much. It's a great program. I'm glad it's there. Also, in kind of a unique information, I also work for local law enforcement in Southwest Virginia. So I can tell you that their overall summary has been positive.
I appreciate your service, sir.
You're welcome.
Justin, thank you again. We appreciate it. And with that, I think we're going to close out the presentation and move on to our next business, which is our appeal. So we have an appeal, JS versus St. Mary's Home. So if I can ask anyone who's here to represent JS, if you all would like to sit at the, oh, they're online, so. Okay.
This is Reginald Day. Latoya just got kicked off, so she's trying to get back on.
Okay, thank you.
And she's representing.
Do we know if this is going to be an open or a closed hearing? That question's directed to Ms. Sawyer.
I'm not sure of that. That'll be for Latoya to answer.
Ms. Sawyer, the Local Human Rights Committee hearing was closed, and it's to protect your child's right to confidentiality. So
thank you.
That's what they're asking.
Thank you.
So I'm sorry, would you prefer this session to be closed or open? If it is closed, then some people here in the room will need to leave.
As Mr. Day said, to protect confidentiality, then it needs to be closed.
Okay, thank you.
All right.